Oh,
Good morning, folks. Welcome to Coffee with Artists. My name is Rachel Wilkins. I'm delighted today to be joined by Colleen Blackard. Colleen is...
hi.
Hi, Colleen. We've known each other we were just reminiscing, actually, that we've known each other for probably over a decade now. We go way back.
Wow.
When we were art babies showing at 320 Studios.
Yeah, that's correct.
In the day. But for anybody who doesn't know Colleen, she creates these beautiful renderings of barns and kind of scenes from Austin, Texas, and all over Texas, and is also the recipient of the Pollock-Krasner Award, which is incredible. So tell our audience a little bit about your work and, kind of how you came to focus on this particular subject that you're so in depth on.
Wow. Well, let's see. It's been an exciting journey of just following whatever I'm excited about at the time. And for a while it was ballpoint pen drawing. So I was trying to figure out, could I actually create these darks and shadows in ballpoint pen circles? So I created that challenge for myself 10 years ago. And then I developed this technique of drawing stars with circles around them, just kind of carving out the darkness to create the light. And I did that for a long time, when we met and for years. And with that body of work, I was able to get the Pollock-Krasner grant. And I was so grateful because that allowed me to have a year in the studio to develop my art. So I spent that whole year kind of figuring out, what do I want to do next? Where do I want to take this? And for me, it was moving into painting, into monotype, into large scale. And so I really have been kind of pushing the limits of what can I do? And just that drive has been getting me where I am now, which is painting storms. There's a big one coming, actually. I'm looking at it. So that'll be fun.
Tell us where in the world you are right now and what's happening.
Right. Well, I left my life in Greenpoint temporarily, and right now I'm back in Austin, Texas. And I went in quarantine for about 2 weeks, and I went to this gorgeous cottage, and I used that time to just to work on my art and to be in the storms and all the things that inspire me right now. I'll be back in nature. And I tell you, when I got there and I saw the bluebonnets, I almost cried. It was just so powerful, and I'm so grateful that I was able to come home. So here I am in Austin, and I'm back with my family, which is really great. I'm here with my parents, and I've turned a room into the studio, but a lot of time I'm out here on our back porch, just watching the weather go by.
Beautiful. It's very serene.
Thanks.
Awesome. So what is, you talked about scale. I remember when we met, you were working very small, very, very small.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Little micro. I think we definitely own at least one of your pieces.
Yes. Yeah.
They were very small, very intricate, like you mentioned, the ballpoint pen.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that first, we did that charity event in Long Island City.
That's right.
This, at the time, for anybody who wasn't around, we did this, what was the name of it, Jen? The live sessions where we would art clash. Yes,
that's right.
We would get 3 or 4 artists together, and we would give them 15 minutes. And Jen was the best compere ever. She was the host, and we would give you guys a topic, and you would have 15 minutes to create something completely random. And I remember that day that there was no ballpoint pens.
Oh my gosh.
We gave you a marker pen, right? Or somebody gave you a marker pen, a Sharpie, right?
Yes, it was a Sharpie. Jen ran out and bought me Sharpies. Thank God.
And you totally created this piece. Didn't it sell there and then?
Yeah, it did. It sold there to a friend. Right on the spot. I was so honored. Yeah, you guys really launched that for me. I'd forgotten that. Thank you. That was an amazing moment.
You're not taking any credit for that, but I just remember that experience because you were somebody who from the get-go, you kind of had your voice. You had your artistic voice. Me personally, I was still experimenting. I still feel like I'm experimenting, but a lot of us were still kind of trying to find our way. But you always had that very clear visual language, right out the gate. And I think that was something that's been consistent throughout your work. When you look at even just the last decade, a Colleen Blackard piece when you see one. Wow. How did you come to that, and what did the journey look like getting to that point?
That's amazing. It's just following the light is really what led me there. I just want to capture that awe and joy in nature that I've always loved. And this is the way that developed for me. So for me, I think I'm just capturing what I see, but it really, you're right. I hadn't seen that, but it is my voice. It is kind of, it's coming from within, and just this drive to share that. love enjoying beauty at nature and the light.
So how did that translate when you decided to go from this like small scale to really humongous pieces, right? You're doing these.
I love working big. It's so much more exciting because then you're within this world. You're building a world for people to experience. And so when they look, like when they have to look up to see the stars, I worked on a piece for 2 years using that circular technique, but then I translated it to ink. And it was this giant starry night, and you have to go look up like 10 feet to see the stars and look down to see the land. And that scale is really exciting because then you're in it. So for me, it was very wonderful.
What were the challenges that came from switching from working so small to large scale?
Stepping back far enough in a New York studio was the biggest challenge.
You had a decent-sized studio. You were in Greenpoint, right?
Yeah. Oh, it was beautiful. I had that studio for 4 years. I loved it. Really gorgeous, tall ceilings and beautiful light coming in from the south. Yeah, it was heaven.
So other than, kind of stepping back from the work, how do you feel that you mentioned that you enjoy working on large scale? How is the work received in comparison to maybe the smaller works? Do you feel that there's a difference?
Yeah, I think it kind of blows them away when they see that it's in marker. That was what you're saying when moved up from ballpoint to scale up in that meticulous stroke to large scale. Moving it to marker was kind of a shock to people because they would see it and think it's a charcoal or something that you can really not spend as much time. But when they saw that it took like a long time to get all those darks, that kind of like surprised them. Wasn't what they were expecting, and I love that moment of surprise.
And I think that surprise element, certainly from what I can recall showing with you in the early days, like people were always blown away that this was ballpoint pen, right? Like it was always that reaction. How did you even begin to start creating with ballpoint pen? What led you to that medium?
Oh man, it was actually my professors in college at Hampshire College. I had just the best. Judith Mann, she was amazing. And I remember getting a prompt from her that I was getting to the darks too quickly with charcoal. So to take my time and spend more time on the work and just kind of see if I could build up those same charcoal blacks with ballpoint pen. I'm like, okay, which introduced this range of tone that I just love. And it allowed me to meditate and kind of like be in this quiet zone of just creating for a lot longer than I was used to. So I would spend months in the studio just enjoying every minute. So, yeah.
So you mentioned you got your BA in, where were you in?
Hampshire College.
Hampshire College in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about going back to get your master's?
Oh, tons. It's kind of been just the one thing I've always kind of wondered about. But I've thought about it for me, and for now I've decided that, I've spent the last 10 years out. I've found an amazing critique group. So I have that influence that I was craving, and to get critiques from really interesting artists that I admire. So I found that in New York, and it's New York Critique Club. And that's been a really wonderful community for that. And then my work is just always developing no matter what. And so I've found ways to grow on my own. So for now, that's exciting for me.
And I think you're just a really good example of somebody who has taken the time to really mix in the right circles in New York and go to the right events. And, I don't mean this in the shallow way. It's very intentional, I think. Tell me, was it intentional?
Absolutely.
Like to get out, and we talk so much about, we talk about this on the podcast all the time, that one of the biggest drivers to, or maybe that's the birds are so loud. Oh my God, that's amazing.
What was that, birds?
They're amazing. Sorry. I got distracted. I was like, those birds are amazing. We don't have a lot of them. But they're singing these beautiful songs.
Martins.
So we talk a lot about relationships and how they're just so crucial to success, right? Like
yes,
you can have all the training and all the education in the world and not move in the right circles, and those opportunities might not come to you.
Right.
You can really make some very important relationships, especially with the luxury of being in New York City. Like for maybe an artist that's out there that is looking at, this new landscape and thinking, well, how do I get out and, get my work in front of the right people? Can you give any kind of feedback on that?
Yeah, you just do what I did. Like the first night I got off the plane when I moved to New York 10 years ago was go to an art opening. I wanted to know where they were. I discovered Williamsburg. I created my own map because I didn't have one at the time of all the galleries that I wanted to go to. Same in Chelsea. I met people who were also going out when I was going out, and then we would go to Chelsea openings every Thursday night. So I'm really grateful for all that time I just spent like with my nose to the ground, just meeting people every week, going to all the shows, seeing everywhere they were. It was just, wow, what an amazing time. I totally recommend that for anyone. And I did that with only like enough money to pay for 1 month of rent in New York, just to kind of try it out. Wow. And 10 years later, there's a career.
That's so wild. I think so many of us come with that kind of mentality, right? Like, I'm just going to throw caution to the wind and just see what happens and see what comes out the other side.
Exactly.
I think you have to have a certain kind of spirit and maybe a little bit of lunacy to move to New York City.
Being young helps, I will say. Yeah. Now that I'm in the 30s, it's like, oh, I don't know if I would have.
I'm exactly the same. I had that same conversation recently. You know, if I knew what I know now, or if I was, 39, pushing 40, and it's a totally different mentality. Like now when I think that I came to New York and had like enough money for 3 months rent and no plan.
Right.
Like, what were you thinking?
I know. But here we are.
Let's tell the tale. So let's talk about those early days. Because I mean, we met, like we would play both exhibiting at, it was a show called Contrast. Mm-hmm. It was at 320 Studios. It was this crazy kind of building where people lived there that weren't supposed to live there, and it was an industrial building, and it was like a real New York experience, right? Like it's like something you would see on a TV show. There was designers in that building. There was all kinds of shenanigans that went on that we were
aware of. But
maybe John Stavros is watching this, so I won't. But this event, it was on the top floor of this penthouse, and it was like maybe 4 times a year, something like that. It was called Contrast Art Show. And there was kind of a group, like, I guess we were kind of like a little collective. We didn't really know it at the time, but
yeah, we were.
It was like a core group of maybe 20 artists at the time. And we would, come into this beautiful space. It was like this rooftop penthouse with this tiny, tiny little patio where we'd all
balcony.
The balcony. And, just there was obviously a bar, and we'd have installations, and we'd have all kinds of craziness. There was, I think, one night we had we had performance art, and there was
many times.
There's quite often a lot of naked people.
There were a lot of body paintings going on.
So it was just kind of like this wild little snippet of time. Like,
oh, it was,
and it feels like a million years ago to me, because it really was. Yep. But when you think back, like I credit that time with giving me that fire, like giving me that passion for, wow, this city has so many possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
This city, like, really believes in artists, because that's where I started to sell. And what about you? What was that experience like for you?
It felt like a Cinderella moment with that first show. Like same. It was just such a magical venue, and it was so New York. Like I think that I was in that show 4 months into my time in New York, and wow, it just blew me away. Like the first night, right off the bat, I met so many wonderful people. I met actually I think a gallerist who invited me to come to the gallery and show my work, and I met some collectors, and I sold, I believe it was 2 of my little drawings right away. I couldn't believe it right off the bat. Yes, it was absolutely magical, and just the community we had. Like some of those, I have such love for everybody in that space.
I think we got to find a way to get everybody on this show. We got to get all that old crew back in this show, because it was a real interesting cast of characters. You had like the Ocean and River Clark, who were just like 2 Renaissance men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the Pudding Factory in Jersey. Gosh.
Yep. And Tracy with her crazy installations.
Oh, I love those.
Of course, Mike Wolf.
Fritz, yeah.
So we should do a little reunion something, I think, at some point. But it was definitely times that I look back on fondly. But again, like we say, like the age factor now, I think about it and I'm like, oh God, I didn't go to bed.
I know. Those would go into dance parties all night. It was like, what? Go get hot dogs on the corner and come back. Wow, what a time.
It was a time. What a time to be alive, for sure. Exactly. Do you see obviously, you know, as you mature, like you know, those kind of the party aspect of the art world is certainly maybe a little less appealing. But you know, there's something that we really at this crossroads right now with not knowing how the art world's going to react to what's happening.
Yeah.
Do you foresee that you? I mean, are you seeing anything cancelled that you maybe had on the calendar for this year? Are you?
Yes.
What, like
It has affected me. My goal right now is to leave the city and do a lot of artist residencies. I went to this amazing one in Ireland that I totally recommend called Kilrelly in Kerry, and it just blew my mind. I was like, yes, this is what I am doing now. I'm going out there. So I had 2 lined up for this fall, one in Wyoming and one in the Great Basin in Oregon. So the Great Basin one, they're moving it off until next year. So I'm lucky that it's just postponed. And we'll see about the one in Wyoming. So I'm waiting on that. But I also had a really big solo show I was looking forward to of my work that should have opened this Saturday, actually, here in Texas. So that will probably be postponed as well. No updates yet. But yeah, it's just kind of a year of pause. Of it. I really did want this time to just quietly kind of develop my painting language and to see where else I want to take my work into installations, maybe a storm room. Like, I'm just like, what else can I do? So having this time to really develop that is very, very useful. And I'm grateful that I have our New York community that I can still access probably now more than ever, no matter where I am. So this time that I gave myself to travel, it actually kind of worked out that I could still connect with New York. Yeah, I don't know if I would have been able to if I just left the city in a normal circumstance. So it's this kind of odd silver lining. I'm really grateful for my community there.
We definitely all have the gift of time right now, whether we want it or not, right?
Yeah, it's definitely upending where my plans for the next 2 years. I have been kind of thinking of leaving the city to see what it's like to live in nature, or closer to it anyway. So my plans might have been pushed up sooner than I thought. So it's a lot in the air right now, but it's all good. It's all right where I need to be.
So you know, let's talk about that a little. You talked about you know you've lived in the city for what, a decade maybe?
Yeah, a decade. What?
So, but your work is so isolated, you know, country, outdoorsy.
Yes.
I don't see any city influence barely in there at all.
Not anymore. Maybe in the early days.
Right.
But yeah, it's been interesting. I think that's why travel has kind of looked like the best choice for me now, just to be out where I'm inspired and to bring that back to the city. That's what I've been doing for years with Texas, like what you're saying with the barn. I even did an entire series about an abandoned barn in Austin, Texas. And I put it everywhere, and I built a little model of it in my New York studio, and I did this whole monotype series about this barn because it was my identity, like this Texas barn in New York. So I've played with that a lot over the years of kind of how to blend the two and how they work together. But for now, the country is kind of winning. Like it's time to be in nature, and I'll bring that back and see what everyone thinks. So
tell us a little bit about growing up. You grew up in Austin, Texas. How was your upbringing?
It was amazing. I'm so grateful. I have the most supportive family, and being away from them has been the hardest part about living in New York for the past 10 years. Luckily, I come back to visit twice a year. I stay for about a month. I find ways to make that happen. But yeah, my family has been my biggest support, and yeah, I'm really grateful to be around them right now, especially.
Did you come from a creative family?
Yes, my mother actually, she used to be an art restorer in the Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth right before I was born. So she brought that kind of museum and that education to my life. And I think there's pictures of me like in museums when I was like a baby, like pointing at a Renoir or something. And but my earliest memory is of a painting that her and her team worked to restore, and it was Frederick Church's Icebergs. And that's my favorite painting of all time. There's something that I felt at a young age when I looked at the submerged icebergs and this crystal clear blue water and like a cave, and it got me. And that kind of awe and wonder that I felt when I looked at that painting is actually what I'm trying to do now with all of my works, that feeling. So that, yeah, it's been a big influence in my life.
Have there been any other creative influences along the way?
Yeah, actually, yeah, my father is a lighting director, and so we had like the best prom pictures.
So much sense now with your work.
Yeah,
And art history. Okay.
yeah, yeah, it definitely came naturally, and I'm so grateful because of that. My dad is a freelancer, so they understand that lifestyle. There was no pressure on me to live a more normal, like 9 to 5 job. Like I've never seen what that looks like around me. I've always kind of seen us figure out how to make things work with doing what we love. So that's been huge. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you talked about your critique group. How important has that community been for you, and how does that look in terms of how you do critique without perhaps offending?
Oh, that is tricky. I've actually I'm a fan of very harsh critique, but not in a to be mean, but to be refreshingly critical and clear about what works and what doesn't. So I'm always encouraging that kind of critique on my work. But when I critique work, it's not like what I do is I find what works and I really bring that out. And I notice when I'm critiquing work, that's kind of what I focus on, and kind of creative ways that people could play with what they're interested in. So just being in that dialogue again is so refreshing. I remember that from Hampshire College. That was what got me into art, like thinking about for myself in my work and developing my strong voice. Yeah, that's what I came back to this group for. And having that dialogue has helped me to kind of talk with other people about my interests, to know about shows maybe I wouldn't have heard of, to know about books that I want to be reading. So I've started like reading all these great art books and things, and just doing my own kind of education about that, and having people to share that with has been just such a relief. It's like, oh, I've been wanting to talk about this for years. So yeah, I found that very useful.
I think there's a lot to be said for just the education that you get from moving to somewhere like New York City.
Absolutely.
Being around that community, or any big major city that has kind of an art hub, immersing yourself in the culture, shows, reading, like you said, critiquing and taking critique, it's almost more valuable than perhaps going and getting a master's.
Yeah, I kind of found my own way. Yeah, I do believe so. And I was kind of looking for ways to be recognized within that community, like academic recognition, and applying for grants is one good way. Like having the residencies and having that Pollock Krasner grant kind of gave me that validation that I was looking for outside of myself. Like, oh, okay, I've gotten this awesome grant now. I can just do what I want, and I know that I'm an artist. I don't have to prove it anymore. So that was what it was for me that I was looking for. So yeah, I definitely recommend finding your own way and trusting your heart on that.
How did that come about then? What was your application process like? Was it one of many? Did you apply multiple times?
No, it was the big one. It was the one that I thought about. There's no deadline on the application, so I think I worked on it on and off for about a year. Kind of had it all ready to go, and then just sat with it for 6 months, just thinking about it. It was just, yeah, it was the big one, the center of my world. And I even found this amazing book by Gail Levin about Krasner's life. So I ended up reading that entire book, and like right as soon as I finished, coincidentally, that's when I applied. So it just kind of all felt like
this one right
was right. Yes, you have the book. Oh my gosh, how do you have that?
I have it sitting on my desk right here.
What?
That's so strange.
Amazing. Yeah. I've met the author, Gail Levin. I went to her talks at the CAA conference.
Oh, wow.
Yes, she's phenomenal. I just love what she's doing for women.
I have a stack of art books on my desk right here because the truth is that I use them to prop up my computer right now because it was too low. This is like from my shelf is what I'm going to read next. This one.
Oh, good.
And also this is I've read this once before, but I'm going to read it again. This is
Ooh.
I got this when I was in Venice, and it's fascinating. But how funny is that? So
there it is. I recommend that.
Lee Krasner always gets the the lesser attention of her counterpart, her husband, Jackson Pollock.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any? Are you seeing any more opportunity afforded to female artists while you're out there than perhaps leaning towards more male?
I am seeing it, especially. What? So was that part?
There's a shift happening.
I do think so. I think it's a long time coming, but it has been happening over the years, especially compared to her time. Just going to the Helmuth Clint show at the Guggenheim last year. I went to a talk at the New York Studio School by the curator, and she was really blown away by the reception in the art world towards her work. They knew it would probably be a good one for the public, but having that kind of the art world pay attention and be really excited about it was very interesting for them. So they're seeing the results of their efforts of getting these women who are unknown in history out there, and I believe that's going to lead for more opportunities. Yeah, I do think it is changing. Absolutely.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
So the actual application, you said, it was consuming. You worked on it for a year.
It wasn't that long. I was just kind of obsessing.
It was a procrastination or an obsession. What did you go with? Just for anybody that's perhaps thinking, what would have to be this big, grand idea?
Yeah. Well, I chose one body of work to highlight, and that was the large ballpoint and marker drawings of the barn. And I showed detail shots of that. You can show 10 images. And then I did the application, and it was a cover letter and an artist statement and a CV and references. Just your standard, not very many things. You just everything requires usually about that much. So it wasn't too time consuming or anything, but I wanted it to be just right. And so for me, that was in the statement of intent and the cover letter, just kind of showing why me right now, like why is this body of work need this funds right now? What will I do with it? And that was the most important part, I think. I just showed how it would be life-changing to get this. Yeah, not just another show, not just another funding for something. It was like, this is the big one. And it was.
Right. Well, what do you think it did for you?
I think, like I said, that confidence, like, oh my God, like I have this recognition, I have this name behind me now. Just for me, knowing that was the biggest thing, because I was looking for that in New York. I wanted that recognition. But the funds, oh my gosh, I got to spend an entire year in the studio and having that confidence that, oh, I am an artist, like this is what I'm doing, what can I do? It opened the door for new things. Like I probably would have stayed in ballpoint and just not really left what I was safe in if I hadn't had the time to really develop something new. And so that just was this renaissance for me. I just had this time to just like study, like I was saying, this critique group, like reading all these different things about all these different artists, and to develop my work, to do the monotypes, and then move into painting and to complete the Abandoned series, my one about the barns.
Amazing. And it's a pretty large financial grant, right? You said it was able to have a studio for the year plus.
Yeah, it was $30,000.
Wow. That's amazing. Congratulations. I never really got to say congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment. Huge accomplishment. So
grateful.
One of the wonderful things that I love about you and just your attitude to art in general and the art world is that you are willing to come back and kind of help those that are coming up through the ranks, and give a little bit of your experience to them. You very kindly joined us as a juror at conception shows in New York City for probably about the last 2 years, I would say. Quite a few shows, which we're incredibly grateful for.
I'm honored.
What is that experience like, actually getting, because it's a lot. There's a lot of artists in each show, it's often, as many as 40. Like, how do you approach that, and what does that give you?
Wow. It's very different seeing it from the other side. It's not what I would have thought as an artist being jurred. I think that was kind of like the most interesting part for me, and just kind of the opportunity to connect with artwork and these artists who have been making all these different kinds of things. I was really surprised, at what really stood out. It wouldn't be like, if you look at my art books, the kind of work that I would be drawn to, but it was the voice that I could see in the work. And that was the strongest thing that I was drawn to. And sometimes that was surprising. I wouldn't have seen that on my own, but just getting to connect with the artist there. I learned a lot. And just seeing all these artists that I could really relate to, like we've all been there, and that's how it starts. And you can see their greatness and what they're becoming and what they've become. It's an exciting time in an artist development to be in one of these shows. And I'm really excited to see where they go, actually.
And it can be a challenge sometimes. I know I personally don't get involved in the juring process because I want to stay as impartial as possible, which is why we bring in amazing people like you. But I find it hard just to not take my personal likes and preferences when you're viewing work, you are obviously instantly drawn to work that you personally like and enjoy.
Of course.
How do you separate that?
I mean, whatever you're drawn to will inevitably kind of be it on a deep level, but it's more than just subject. It's more than just technique. Yeah, it's not about me anymore when I'm looking at the art. That's the difference. It's being over there with them and what they're working on, what they're passionate about, like how they're expressing it. Yeah, that's been, yeah, I just can't think about the work that I would make. I just have to look at what's being done, I guess, and that's the difference.
What do you kind of see in your own personal journey as we move forward? Do you see any room for teaching or any room for, anything that really involves working with others? Or do you see kind of just the one path towards, what's kind of your big picture goal?
Yeah, my big picture goal is to have like my large ranch style studio, kind of like the Georgia O'Keeffe life, just out there making my work and inviting people to my space and to be there. And one thought I've had recently is, what if I could start my own artist residency? Because that's brought me so much joy to go to these places. So kind of seeing how I could do that and perhaps have critique groups there, like just create that community like what we have in New York, bring it to Texas, bring it to other places that I might want to go. And I think that's what's exciting to me now. I could see that as a possibility to have that conversation, create a space for that in the places that inspire me.
So for somebody who's perhaps never done a residency, what does that experience look like? What do you kind of take away? What do you go in hoping for?
Wow. Well, let's see. I went into the Ireland one and I wasn't really sure what to expect. Getting to go across country in Ireland was just very magical. So that kind of magical element wasn't something I knew I would find when I got there. But having my own cottage and getting to live have a turf stove, like peat stove, and like a cottage right on the
solo residency? Were you by yourself?
There was a village of 7 different artists, so we each had our own cottage. So it was kind of a hermitage. That was the goal of this one, because of the monks at Skellig Michael and that whole mentality that they brought. So yeah, I didn't expect to find myself at the space, but that's exactly what happened. I got to know who I am in the absence of New York and all of the social life there. I got to know what I want out of my art. I got to know myself. Like if I were at the edge of the world, which I was, and if I were in this place for the rest of my life and didn't interact with anyone, I would still be fulfilled because I'd be making my work for me and falling deeper in love with who I am. Like I got a lot of, in that silence, I could hear my voice the loudest. And you can't really tell people that's what they're going to get when they go to these things. So
that could be good or bad, right?
Yeah, it definitely was, an interesting place. It wasn't all flowers, but it was really deep, and it was exactly what I wanted it to be. So I recommend them. I'd been in New York for so long, but I didn't realize the value of travel in the development of my work and myself, and how important that actually is as well. So yeah.
And that one was in a particularly beautiful part of the world. It was in Kerry? Was it on the Ring of Kerry, that area?
Yes, Ring of Kerry and the most westerly part.
Just beautiful. Jen and I traveled there a couple of years ago. But the day that we actually drove the Ring of Kerry, it was so foggy that you couldn't see anything. It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. We would kind of stop at the side of a road and we'd kind of ramble down these little pathways, and there'd be like a little beach there. It's just, it's magical. It's really magical.
All these old stones that have been there for centuries. Like you're in this space that's older than anything we're around in New York or Texas. It's like this space is older than us. Like you have to interact with it. And that's an interesting element. Ireland. That's nothing else like it.
What was the work like that you came out of the experience with?
I surprised myself because I developed my painting language more like I wanted. I did these paintings on plein air of the stones, these like sacred stones, and all these sheep are kind of around me, and I'm sitting here painting in a sheep field. So I got some really great paintings out of it, but I also was kind of figuring out what I wanted my work to do and how far I wanted to push it. So I did these rain paintings where I just rolled acrylic paint on Yupo paper and just put them outside during one of the crazy storms that we had. And then I got them back after like 2 minutes, and they just created these gorgeous patterns. So now I have this imprint of the rain from Ireland.
Wow.
Which took my work totally, I can't believe I would have never done that if I hadn't gone there.
That's amazing. So awesome. So what do you feel that art gives you in terms of strengths, and what does it give you in terms of vulnerabilities?
Wow, strengths and vulnerabilities. I mean, you can start with vulnerabilities. Like, you have to be completely authentic in your work. Yeah, for me, it just kind of reveals all of everything that I'm working on as a person. You come up against in your work, like sharing your voice and getting it out there for people to like or dislike, for having that not to affect you. Like, it really puts you in the spotlight to face these things on a large scale. So as a person, has helped me to develop myself as well. Vulnerabilities, yeah. And the strengths I've gotten, yeah, it's definitely confidence and liberation at living the life of my dreams. Yeah.
How do you feel when somebody's standing in front of your work? First of all, what do you hope that they experience or take away? And how does it make you feel to get kind of positive feedback?
It's a surprise because I don't know how anyone will react, but that's what I'm hoping it will be for them too. Like, I'm hoping they come up to it and they see something they haven't seen before, and they're just like, "What?" And a lot of the times I do get a reaction like that, and it still surprises me every time. Or like how someone will bring their own stories to the work, and so it's no longer about me; it's their relationship to this piece of art and what that creates for them, and that blows me away every time.
Mm.
Yeah.
I remember a series that you did a while back. I forget the name of it, but it was your grandmother.
Yeah,
It was a piece over the top. It was kind of a narrative on Alzheimer's.
that's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was first called Fading Memories, Emerging Spirit, was a series about her. And then at that show at Orchard Windows with this transparent mylar, or translucent, so you'd have to touch it to see the work below. And that began because I included a picture of my grandmother that I had sketched right after she passed from Alzheimer's. And I did that drawing at that time just as a way to kind of deal with the situation in front of me and to get the new reality. But I wanted to show it, but it was so incredibly personal. I didn't want it to be seen in that context. So my solution was to cover it with transparent mylar and translucent. So then people would have to reach out to see it. Yeah, and then it kind of evolved into the whole show, where I did a drawing of my grandmother as well. It's a beautiful portrait of her. And I covered it up with drafting film. And then when people would have to reach out to see her, that touched me on a level I didn't expect. I just remember, yeah, the fact that they would reach out to remember her. That really touched me. So I didn't expect that result, but that was very important for me. And yeah, I think it was kind of an exciting texture too to touch, because it was so tactile, like this kind of smooth but feel a little coarseness, and you can just like draw your hand across the landscape to see. I liked that. I liked that people would have to enter the piece in their own way. That was exciting.
It was beautiful because of the nature of the material that was covering the piece. You could only small parts of it were revealed with your touch, right? You wouldn't really see the whole piece.
Yes, yes.
You got to have your own personal exploration of what was happening.
That's right. Yeah, and so in the end, it only exists in your memory as a whole, and that's how you'll keep it. It'll exist as long as the memory lasts. Thank you. I hadn't forgotten that you work. I haven't thought about it in a while.
Beautiful. I love that series. It was so beautiful. Did you do you ever think about going really big with that?
Really big? Oh, wow. Do an entire like 10-foot drafting film. I hadn't thought of that. I like it. That would be amazing.
It would be amazing. I mean, there's also that, I don't know about you, but one of my big motivators in my work was I wanted people to be able to touch it. I wanted people to be able
I remember.
Right. I'd be like, just touch it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Because I felt as it doesn't always apply because certain mediums don't allow for touch. But what did you get from that experience of kind of inviting people in? Do you feel that you gained a new insight to how perhaps people interact and are impacted by art?
I did, yeah. Like I said, I couldn't imagine how that would affect me personally to have them reach out to see what I was creating. When they had to go that extra mile to see something, that was interesting. That I'd never seen that before, and how they interacted with some people wouldn't even touch the work, even though I told them I could. Like it's okay, you can touch it. No, they wouldn't. It just was too deeply ingrained. Yeah, I can't really control how they respond to it, and so that was an exciting unknown.
So let's just circle back on something that you said that made me almost spit out my coffee, but Orchard Windows Gallery. So this is just another one of those what the hell New York stories. It was a gallery. This is going back probably more than a decade. It has to be more than a decade, actually.
It was during the decade and before, I think.
Yeah. So it was a gallery, and I say it was a gallery on the Lower East Side, and it was basically, I think it was like a clairvoyant space.
It was.
Because it had like this psychic reading sign in this very Lower East Side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this tiny, tiny gallery space with this character named Dino who ran the space. And Dino just had this air of like, something's not quite right. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's not quite right. And so a bunch of us had shows there, and
We did.
all going great. And we had these little shows, and we'd have these gatherings and openings on a Thursday night, and everything was great. And then I want to say it was Elam that was having a show,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden the gallery was locked,
Mm-hmm.
and his work was locked in there.
That's right. I think it was.
And then all of a sudden Dino had been kidnapped, and there was like a ransom, and there was all this craziness, and it turned out, long story short, that he'd staged his own kidnapping.
What? I had forgotten that. No, that makes sense.
The whole thing, and there was cars stolen, and it was just, it's like you can't make this stuff up, but it's like a movie waiting to happen, the art world in New York City.
It was. I do remember he would show up to art openings with a blindfold on and say, I see nothing, I see nothing.
I think it came to some of those very early conception shows that we had down in downtown in New York as well.
So.
Thinking back to those times, when we started conception, like it was, we really didn't have kind of a business structure. It was just like one giant party in a basement of a fancy restaurant on Warren Street in the financial district.
Mm-hmm. Brick.
Yeah.
Yeah, brick.
It was a lot of fun. Again, it was kind of more of a party than it was an art show, but
it was both.
it was. But it gave it just had that energy, and I think that was what really, I saw that energy, and I'm like, there's something here that needs to be explored. Like, we need more of this.
Mm-hmm.
We need to find a way to be able to make it sustainable, obviously. But that's really where conception was born, in those kind of dusty basements, shall we say?
Yes.
What do you think, perhaps like a young artist who's coming out of art school and contemplating moving to New York City?
Just do it.
Yeah, there you go. But no, we talk about like moving in those circles. Like, what are the relationships that are important, and who? You don't have to name names, but have there been some relationships that you've formed along this way that have been able to open doors for you that perhaps wouldn't otherwise have been opened?
Yes, absolutely. Right when I first was thinking of moving to New York, I think I reached out on Craigslist to a gallery looking for assistants, and that happened to be later the studio of Jan Frank, this amazing artist down on Bond Street. But yeah, I remember just kind of helping him for a few years, and during that time, he kind of became a mentor. So in my first few years, he really was very influential. He was the one who told me to apply to the Paul Krasner, and he was one of my references. He'd also gotten it himself. He showed me it was possible. He really took me under his wing, and we would talk art world and the openings. And yeah, I'm so grateful for Jan. Like, he was huge in my career early on. So that was a big, a really big important friendship that I had. Who else? I mean, so many along the way. We met so many people those years. Gosh.
Some of the most interesting. I know you met Jerry Saltz probably.
Oh, yes.
4 times.
Yes, I'm so grateful for what he's doing right now. I just saw a talk that he was doing with the UN, I believe, or yeah, someone in Geneva. But it was about kind of the future of the art world and why it's important to be making art now as a young artist, and just everything he's always done to support young artists, the next generation is what he calls us. Like, that's an incredible voice that I'm really glad that he's sharing out there. And yeah.
Who's been the most interesting character that you've come across on your?
Interesting character. Okay, he's up there too in that category. Yeah,
he's kind of an acquired taste. You either love him or hate him.
I guess so. Yeah, it depends on who you are, I suppose. He definitely has the art world persona, and an online one. So he's got a strong personality, and it's perfect. It serves him well. But I think he's got really good heart as well. He cares about young artists. That's important. Gosh, let me think. Other artists. I really was inspired by Kathy Bradford when I saw her give a talk with Judith Bernstein at a CA conference years ago. Just everything that she overcame to be where she is now and to be herself, like so authentically her. Like every communication is just like vulnerable and true and powerful. Seeing her was really inspiring. And through the Critique Club, we went on a studio visit to meet her. So I got to go to her studio as well and see what that's like in Williamsburg and just, hear her directly speak with artists. A lot of interesting people along the way. Those are probably the two most profound. Yeah, I'll think of more.
Is there any New York experience, whether that be seeing work in a gallery or seeing work in a museum, perhaps, that has really took your breath away and had a lot of meaning to you?
So many. The one that kind of personally resonated was the Bruce Conner show at MoMA years ago, just because of how varied his work was. And he had these kind of star drawings. I was like, wait a minute, I'm doing that. And then he had this whole series about time and kind of like dates, like Ankara kind of style or something. And I was like, wait a minute, I did that in my show. Like I just started to see like different sides of what I was like, do not touch the art, I think was one piece. I was like, what? So just seeing how varied one person's career can be was very validating, like all in one place. I could picture, like as we all do, is like kind of what is my MoMA retrospective going to look like when I get there? And like seeing that was a really good kind of glimmer of what that could be. And also at the first one I saw that really got me was also at MoMA, and who was that? Why can't I think of his name right now? One of the big ones that knew Jackson Pollock. He did all the women. I can't believe I can't think of it. What? Yeah, de Kooning. Why am I? Thank you. Wow. Seeing his show and his development over his life really got me. Like, I think I almost teared up at the very end, because when you see someone from where they started to Infiguration, like where they developed and like what they finally were doing later on in life, it's like, oh my God, this is a life we're looking at. He is here. This is him, and we're experiencing it in all its glory. Like, what an incredible experience. So that really spoke to me, just how much someone can develop over their lifetime. And it just validated what I know, that I'm going to be making my best work when I'm like 70.
Right. There's no place like MoMA. I'm like just always in awe when I go there. And I remember going there for the first time when I moved to New York, and sitting in front of those Pollocks and just, I'd only ever seen them in textbooks or on the screen, and you can't quite capture that feeling or that emotion that you feel when you sit in front of something. Because because it's just so humongous. It's a huge piece. But just you can feel the energy almost resonate from these pieces when you stand in front of them.
Yeah, they're present. The artist is present.
Speaking of the artist is present, did you see the artist is present at?
I did see the artist is present.
Did you get to sit with Marina?
I did not. I was too shy, but that was my first MoMA show, actually. I don't think I even knew who she was, because that was like right when I arrived. Like that first month, I made a friend at an art fair, and he invited me to that, and I saw this woman standing in the middle or sitting in her chair in the red. I was like, what is she doing? Like, I was so new. I had no idea. But I do remember there was like two nude bodies, like two people standing in a hallway that you had to walk between. Can't remember if I did or not, but we saw a lot of people doing that. Scandalized.
We were actually in Florence January last year, and Jen and I were doing a trip. We went to Venice, Florence, and Rome.
Oh, wow.
And I got really sick in Florence. I was really not doing that great, and so, we're just going about our night, and all of a sudden we get to this museum, and there's a sign outside, and it was Marina Abramovich exhibit. I'm like, we have to do it.
Yeah.
And it was like 6 or 7 different rooms, and they were exploring all of the major performance pieces that she's done throughout her career. So it's kind of like a mini retrospect. And there was the one that you talked about with the 2 naked figures and this very small gap in between.
Yeah.
You have to walk between, and we both did it.
Oh, wow.
We have pictures of it. And it really pushes your level of comfort. Like you don't know what you're gonna feel until you actually do it. But I just admire her so much. Like, she really pushes those boundaries.
Yes.
But we also got to, in the final room, they had a setup of The Artist is Present, and I got to sit across from one of her, I guess, her collective that do this, this traveling exhibit. And it was just such a moving experience. I was like moved to tears afterwards. Like, it's just
Really?
the power that art can have, and particularly those kind of pieces where they really make you connect with your human, right? Connect. Like, I had to sit and look at this complete stranger, look him in the eyes across from me I didn't have to, I chose to.
Yes.
But it felt like just such a spiritual, elevating experience.
Yeah. You can't explain it. It's just in that moment.
Do you have when you create art, do you feel like it's coming from another place? Do you feel present? Do you see it as something that you have a hand in, or that somebody else has a hand in?
And the ballpoint drawings, yeah, definitely. It just was coming through because I left so much room to chance to see how the composition would develop. And so I would just be doing the same thing over and over and seeing what that happened and just kind of be blown away. It's like, I don't even know. I do remember that feeling. I think right now the exciting was like, can I do this with the paint? So when something amazing happens with it and I succeed, I'm like, how did that happen? Like, I can't control this. Either it does or it doesn't with paintings. So there's a lot of unknown and just kind of reverence for that process, what you're letting into your space. And like, just by focusing on tone and light and dark, like what else comes through? Like, I love that surprise for me. Definitely.
So I just want to know, what is it about things like the barn, or what is it about those places that resonate with you so deeply that you want to just explore?
Well, the barn particularly, I was fascinated by it, kind of like thinking about the light on the subject. So I wanted to capture that at first, like Monet's haystacks or something. But then when I started to develop that, I realized, oh my God, this is my self-portrait. Like, I identify with this structure. And that gave it a whole nother side. So then it became my story, and using the barn as my symbol. So because I'm the older sibling, I mean, my sister get along great, like we're 1.5 years apart, but I always kind of felt like emotionally abandoned when she was born. And we all have our sibling rivalry stories. That was mine. So this was my way of processing in a delightful way, which is over the top, overly dramatic, just having fun with it, getting it all out and playing with it. And yeah, me and my sister both enjoyed the series.
Do you think it allowed for personal growth as well as artistic growth?
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, it was all personal growth. Just kind of seeing all these different things. Just the one that still strikes me today is Release. This one I did where the barn is kind of being overcome by all these waves in the ocean. And that one I showed with Conception Gallery. Oh, that's right.
I remember.
That was a wonderful show. I love that. Yeah. And just that piece, kind of like putting it in that show, felt like letting go of my kid to go off to kindergarten. I was like, it'll be okay. Like, I was so attached to that one, and I still am. Like, that's so real.
Well, that show was so deep and personal for so many, because it was the title of the show was Brink.
Yeah.
So, like, kind of take your own interpretation of the word brink. At the brink of something, whether that's good, bad, or
right.
We had everything from, somebody. I think Stephen Hall had the basket of guns. It was the conversation around gun violence at the time, and
yeah,
your amazing piece. It was hard to view that piece because it felt like life was being swept away.
Yeah.
It was a challenge to look at. That was probably one of yours that I felt the impact of. I felt the weight of it more than any of your other pieces.
Mm.
And then we had, of course, in the middle of the gallery, we had that two artists, Ken and Eddie,
Eddie.
had their studio destroyed during Hurricane Sandy, and so they proposed to rebuild their studio right in the middle of this gallery. And we had this huge space. It's like
So
this
cool.
open gallery, like kind of warehouse space, and they rebuilt that studio. And we actually had the Wall Street Journal came out to that show.
That's right.
It was kind of crazy, but it was that was another interesting time. But yeah, that piece was there was a lot of drama and a lot of I guess it felt like there was fear in there. Was there fear in there?
There was letting go, sadness. I guess the waves had fear. Yeah, just the things you can't control that are coming. Yeah, still feel that. But just the barn was doing everything it could to stay afloat, but it just needed to let go and sink. I had a future one where it was at the bottom of the ocean, like hanging out with sharks and things, kind of peaceful. So it survived that, but it didn't know that at the time. So,
is there one piece that you know, or any pieces in your collection that you would have a hard time letting go of?
oh wow. Some of my early works, definitely. I'm really attached to one of the first star drawings that I did. And that whole series was probably my most personal. It was just like coming into my own voice, but it was also at the time a friend passed away. He was 22 and I was like 22, and just having that kind of shock really created that series where I was kind of like looking for him in the stars. So the first piece I did for him, that one, I don't think I could ever let go of.
What about looking forward? Is there any one piece that you kind of have on your mind that you?
Yes. Looking forward, the next work is, gosh, this whole storm series, because it's not just, like for me, it's a technical exercise in learning how to use my painting language and develop that, but it's also the experience of a storm. So I'm really excited, and it's seriously almost starting to rain, like I'm feeling right now. But that kind of anticipation of a storm building, just right before the lightning strikes, but being inside, being somewhere safe like this, like I want to capture that experience. I want to create that shelter from the storm. So all of these different elements, experiments I'm doing, like I'm taking sound recordings of storms happening. I got some in Ireland, I got footage. I'm trying to figure out how I can put it all together to create, perhaps I did this massive mural, maybe do another storm mural, and create this shelter from the storm and all the different aspects of what a storm is and how it affects the environment, how the rain falls on a leaf, like down to a snail, or like, yeah, just all of that, like macro, micro. I want to create the experience for you. I wanted to build that. So that's what's fueling me right now.
Amazing. Well, we look forward to keeping up with you and obviously seeing what's next as always. So just let our audience know where they can learn more about you and your work and perhaps what you have coming up.
Totally. You can go to my website, ColleenBlackard.com, and that's my name, like here, ColleenBlackard.com, and also my Instagram, Colleen Blackard as well. But yeah, I will keep you posted on the future dates of this big solo show when it's rescheduled, and I'll always be posting from these residencies that I have.
Fantastic. All right, folks. Well, thank you, Colleen. Thank you for being here. It's
always Rachel.
To chat with you. I could hang out with you all day and listen to the storm. But we have hit that hour mark. So have a wonderful day, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in and for your support. Go ahead and click subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, and we will be back same time tomorrow. Thanks so much.